back to Yarnside Chats. I'm your host, Sarah Wilson, and you are watching episode 3. If you're looking for episodes 1 and 2, they can be found on my YouTube station, which is www.youtube.com/thesexyknitter. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to use Kitchener stitch to seamlessly graft two pieces of stockinette together. This is useful for so many things, and you're going to see it a lot in patterns, especially patterns for top-down socks or for mittens. That can be used to finish off the top of the mitten. You can use this in the round if you need to knit something. If you want to knit stockinette sideways in the round, that could be used to graft that together. Also useful if you're knitting a stockinette and you need to say you have a lot of stockinette that you have to frog. Well, instead of frogging it, you could possibly cut it and then use Kitchener stitch to seam it back together. So it's Kitchener stitch is going to be reversible from back to front. It does not leave a ridge, so it's just going to look like a continuous piece of stockinette. Once you finish it, you won't be able to tell the back from the front, and you won't be able to see where the Kitchener stitch was done. So it's really useful. You'll see it a lot. It's a good skill to have. And I know a lot of you probably already have done Kitchener stitch, but one thing I hear a lot is that, you know, Kitchener, I have to look at the instructions every single time I do Kitchener stitch. So what I'm going to teach you today is a couple of tips to help you remember how to do the Kitchener stitch without having to look at the instructions every single time. So for today's swatch, you're going to need a little swatch. I've just made, you know, like 2 inches by 3 inches. It's stockinette, so it's knit on this side, purl on this side, and I have live stitches at the top and live stitches at the bottom. So what we're going to be doing today is we're actually going to be seaming this flat piece into a little tube. And we're going to do that using Kitchener stitch, and when we're done, you will not be able to tell where the seam was. It will actually look like it was knit sideways in the round, which is kind of a cool little technique. But again, this is useful for so many things. It's a great thing to be able to know how to do, and particularly to be able to know how to do without looking at the instructions. So grab your needles, make up a little swatch, and get your yarn, and let's go learn how to do this. Okay, so we're ready to go. I've made a smaller swatch because I realized, working across the larger swatch, that it doesn't actually take that long to teach this technique. So I made a smaller swatch, and that's good news, because it's not going to take a whole swatch this big for you to learn this easy trick. So you're going to want to cut your yarn, leave about, 3 times the edge that you're casting off, plus 4 or 5 inches or so. You want to get your darning needle. I got mine in a handy little tin here. Okay, so thread your needle onto the yarn. Okay, you're going to want to pick up the needles, hold them parallel to the ground with both of the needle tips pointing to the right. Okay, so for this purposes of this video, I'm going to be referring to this wooden needle as the front needle. That is the needle that is nearest to my body, and this metal needle here, that's the farthest away from my body, I'm going to be referring to that as the back needle. The good news about Kitchener stitch is that it's basically just knitting and purling. So if you can knit and purl, you can absolutely do the Kitchener stitch. No reason to be afraid of it whatsoever. You're just going to be treating your darning needle like it's a knitting needle. Alright, so here's the thing with Kitchener stitch. Other than the setup, which I'm going to teach you in just a second, and you don't have to worry about because you're going to be able to remember how to do that also, Kitchener stitch is worked in pairs of stitches across both needles. You're always going to work 2 stitches off the front needle, and then you're going to work 2 stitches off the back needle. What you need to remember is that you're always going to work 1 knit and 1 purl. So your pairs of stitches, 1 knit and 1 purl. Here's what you need to remember. On the front needle, the first stitch will always be a knit stitch. On the back needle, the first stitch is always a purl needle. Now, if you can remember that, then you've got it, and you won't have to look at the instructions. Just remind yourself, 2 stitches at a time, 1 knit, 1 purl. Front needle, knit comes first. Back needle, purl comes first. And that's it. You'll be able to remember, I promise you. Okay, so we're ready to do the setup. Now the setup is worked from one stitch on the front needle and one stitch on the back needle. Now here's the thing, if you can remember that the knit stitch should come first on the front needle and the purl stitch comes first on the back needle, then all you have to do for the setup is to tell yourself to do the opposite. We're going to start with the front needle. So what's the opposite of the knit stitch, which is normally going to come first? Well, it's the purl stitch. So again, treating my darning needle like it's a knitting needle, I'm going to go into that front stitch on the front needle. Like it was a purl stitch, I'm going to pull the yarn all the way through. Give it a little tug, don't pull too tight. Just, just enough to get that tension. Okay, that's my setup on the front needle. Now I'm ready to do the setup on the back needle. Usually the stitch that comes first on the back needle is the purl stitch. So my setup stitch is going to be the knit stitch. And I'm going to go into that. Don't let your yarn go over the needle. It's going to always go under both of the needles. So I've gone through there like a knit stitch. Now I'm ready to start. That's it. That's the whole setup. So we're going to do 2 stitches off the front stitch. Which comes first? The knit comes first. So I'm going to go into that like a knit stitch. I'm going to pull it off the needle. The first stitch that you work on each needle will always come off the needle, and the last stitch will always stay on the needle. So for the front needle, the knit stitch comes off. Then you go through the second needle, or the second stitch, sorry, like it was a purl stitch. That one stays on. Now I'm ready to do the back needle. I'm going to go through the first stitch like it's a purl stitch and take it off the needle. Go ahead and pull your yarn all the way through. And then I'm going to go through the second stitch like it was a knit stitch. Again, don't let it go over the needle. You're going to let it go under the needle. That's it. That's the whole thing. I've done a knit and a purl off the front needle and a purl and a knit off the back needle. I'm just going to repeat that across the row. So the first stitch here is knit. That's going to come off the needle. Second stitch is the purl. That one stays on the needle. Now I'm go to the back needle and the first stitch is a purl. That comes off the needle. Second stitch is the knit. Getting all tangled up here. Make sure your yarn goes between the needles. There. If you lose track of where you are, all you have to do is look at your yarn. The yarn is attached to this stitch on the back needle. I can see that. And if I don't remember which stitch it is, I can just look at the direction that the yarn is going through the stitch. In this stitch, it's going from the left to the right, just like a knit stitch would be performed. You would put your needle, your knitting needle, through the stitch from left to right, just like the yarn is in there now. So I know where I'm at now because I know I just did the knit stitch on the back needle. I'm ready to go to the front needle. So you would go to the front needle, do the knit and push that off, and do the purl, and do the purl, and that one comes off. You can see it goes fairly quickly once you've got it in your head what you're doing. And then you just have to pay attention that the yarn isn't getting tangled up somewhere it shouldn't be getting tangled up. It should always be going between the needles. It doesn't need to go over a needle, and we're not really making stitches. Okay, here's how I finish off. I don't know how the rest of the world finishes off, but this is how I finish off Kitchener stitch. Somebody can tell me if I'm doing it wrong. This is just me. This is one of the things that I love about knitting, that there's not any right or wrong way to do it. If you're happy with the way that you're doing it and you like the way that it looks, then you're doing it right. So for this video, we're going to say I'm doing it right. Okay, when I've gotten to the last stitch, I've just gone through that last stitch on the front needle like I was a purl stitch, and of course I'm going to leave it on the needle. I'm not going to take it off yet. Now I have 2 stitches on the back needle. I'm going to purl that first one and take it off the needle. Then I'm going to knit that last one. Okay. Here's what I do. I go ahead on the last stitch. That should be a knit stitch. I leave it on the needle until I work the last stitch on the back needle. So the last stitch on the back needle is going to be a purl. So you can purl that one and take that off. And here's what I do. This is my little trick. I go ahead and go through the first one again like a pearl and then take it off the needle. So then you can just kind of flatten things out, pull your yarn nice and tight like that. Okay, now you can have a look. Let's see, put this on my finger here. Alright, and that's the row right there that we just Kitchenered. I don't know if you can see that or not. As we go around, you can see all the little V's forming their stockinette that we made, and there's the row again that we Kitchenered. I'm going to turn it inside out and show you it is invisible from both sides. Again, that's the row in there that we just Kitchenered, and then this is the rest of it, what the rest of it looks like. So that's it. Now you can just weave in your ends. I'm not going to show you how to do that on this video, and that's it. So once you weave your ends in, you're ready to go. And if you were making a sock or some such, you might have this little bit poking out here. When you weave your ends in, I'm just going to tuck that through there. What you can do is just tug really hard on that first, and you can see that that little nub went away. So you could basically just pull it back down into the sock or the mitten top or whatever it is you're making, and that little pointy bit will go away, and then you can weave your ends in. So that's it. That's Kitchener stitch. Now you know how to do it. You know how to remember how to do it without having to look at the instructions every time. Well, let's go wrap up. That's it for this time. You've just learned how to do the Kitchener stitch without having to look at the instructions. I'm the Sexy Knitter, reminding you that sexy is a state of mind. Visit me on the web at www.sexyknitter.com or on Ravelry, Twitter, and Etsy as the Sexy Knitter. See you next time!